Hey everyone, welcome back to Dungeon Brew. We are approaching the end of our Strongholds series, and today we're talking about wizards. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Hey everyone, we are in the final video of our Strongholds series, where we are going to be talking about wizards. Definitely saved one of the most beloved classes for myself, at least, for last. Joshua, do you want to get started in talking a little bit about what a wizard stronghold looks like?
So, when you think of wizard strongholds, I think that it's pretty easy just to shift right into an arcane type of stronghold. I think that it makes the most sense for us to consider that it's going to be magically protected, magically based, in some way, sense, or form. And I'm a little old school on this. I mean, when I think of wizards, I'm usually diving back into 1980s, 1970s, even movies around wizards. And that's what I perceive. And so my poor players usually have to go through that gamut whenever I'm creating a wizard stronghold. But wizard strongholds can have some type of variance to them as well in regards to, whether or not the wizard has a particular type of school of magic that they're utilizing. It could be abjuration or conjuration, divination, necromancy, transmutation, evocation. There could be something that they're utilizing there that allows them to have a little bit of variance in terms of the type of spells or magic that's being utilized or what the protections look like specifically for that stronghold. And then, of course, there's also the subclasses of wizard too that you may see influence how exactly they're approaching their stronghold development. And so you just need to be considerate of your PC and what they are looking at, and then maybe sitting down and being creative with them about how they would like to have their stronghold created and protected overall. So I don't know. That's what I got off the cuff.
Okay.
Anything that I missed?
There's a couple of interesting thoughts that I had just while you were talking. I mean, so for one, I like the idea because I like the idea of paying attention to their chosen archetype, right? Going into an illusionist stronghold versus a conjuration stronghold should be completely different, right? One of them you're going to be going in and it's a house of mirrors and nothing's real, but everything's real and you can't tell what's what. That is very different. It makes me think of the tent in Joaquin's Promenade in Baldur's Gate, right? When you go into that tent, you aren't supposed to fight any of the creatures because if you fight them and acknowledge that they're real, then the illusions will actually harm you. Whereas if you just ignore the illusions, then they can't harm you. Which I think is really, really, that's something you can steal easily and throw in there because even though there's a ton of people who have played this game, I don't think there's a whole lot of people who are going to, in the game, in the moment, they're not going to be I'm going to ignore that illusion. It's the same thing with when you get into, and I'm going to lose the name of the location, but there are some monsters that you end up fighting at one point, but they're actually knights. So that's something else that the illusionists can do, where it's they make you think that you're fighting one type of creature, but in reality you're fighting a different type of creature. So there's a lot of fun that you can have with the illusionist. Conjuration is kind of the same vein, though, where it's you're walking into a room, you're fighting a bunch of conjured creatures that continuously spring up. So they're popping out of the walls and out of the floors and all over the place. You walk into the wrong room, it's conjuring something on you. But this kind of extends to any of these archetypes where you really have to lean heavily into the type of magic that they're dealing with, because that is the speciality of the wizard, and that is what they're going to be using to defend their stronghold.
Yeah, and I particularly like things like enchantment. I mean, honestly, not just keep going through the entire list, but when I think of things like Odysseus, and him being on the island where all of the men are enchanted by eating the food or the water, you could walk into a stronghold and be hit with a spell and miss your save, and next thing you know, you're having tea with your companions around little tables, and you could be stuck there for indefinitely, enchanted in this sense because you can't make your saves and get out of it. And it can really make the stronghold kind of interesting for those that come in and find, all these individuals that have been enchanted that are stuck in particular positions or doing certain routines or actions or have habits that are meaningless in nature. And you just happen to have made your save and you see people that have been stuck there for hundreds of years doing the same old shit.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that in terms of I think in terms of flavor, though, right, it's really important to pay attention to that archetype because that's going to give you a different sense of what the tower is about. And I think that you talk about this a lot, the mood or the aura or the atmosphere. that can be laid into much in the same way. If you're going to, if you're seeing the tower from a distance, a tower of a necromancer should not look the same as the tower of an abjurer. So they should have a different look to them. You know, the necromancer is going to have this dark grove around it that's filled with undead and just black and dark and evil. And then you've got the tower of the abjurer that might look something closer to like a militaristic stronghold. It's got walls and sentries and all kinds of other stuff around it that definitely has a different feel to it that I think is very important just in your approach.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I like the idea of having it look a different way, but also just knowing that the magic is going to be embedded there in some way. You know, you may see this towering dark tower that's sitting on the edge of whatever. You walk up to it, there's a door that leads inwards, and the only staircase goes down.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's immediately mind-boggling. Like, how's there one staircase that goes down and a tower that I see going up? What exactly is going to happen when I take step on this first stair? Like, it really needs to be a lot of mind tricks in a way that's different than you see trickery happen in places like the Rogues that we talked about.
Right, yeah. And that's a good point, too. And I was kind of thinking about that in terms of traps and that type of stuff. I think that we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of our
probably. Man, we love antagonist shit.
The antagonist stuff there. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of with like the conjuration. It's like you walk in, you go into an antagonist conjures wizard tower and stuff is getting summoned. The illusions, the enchantments, all the stuff we're talking about. So in terms of a PC, let's get focused on the PC.
We'll circle back to antagonists. How does our PC get their stronghold?
Right, how does the PC get the stronghold? So this is something that I actually play with a lot in the games because, again, wizards are one of my favorite classes. So in the second edition version that we play, I have Circle of the Magi that you have to affiliate with, and that's the method that you get approval into that organization, which is just the idea of you're either affiliated with good wizards, neutral wizards, or evil wizards mostly, and those are the ones who take you in, apprentice you, teach you magic, and when you become affiliated with those, then you have free access to towers that are associated with that circle. So you're currently playing a Cursed, which is an evil caster, and another player in our game is playing a Circle of the Black magic user, and they're also affiliated with the Circle of the Black. So both of you are trying to go down the same route where you're getting access to the Circle of the Black towers, and because you can do that, you can go in there and trade, you can go in there and interact, you can go in there and craft magic items or perform alchemy or whatever it is that you want to do. And as you gain level and you gain prestige and you gain power, you get more access, and then eventually you can say, okay, I want to found my own tower, and they're the ones who can direct you to a location for one, or they're ones who are going to go, hey, you know, we've either got a Circle of the Black Wizard who is not playing by the rules. He needs to be taken out. If you take him out, you can have his tower. Or we've got this Circle of the Red that is in our territory that we're not happy with. If you go take out the Circle of the Red Tower, then you can have their tower. We're going to help you build a tower because we really want to establish territory in this other region or in this other city. But it's basically this idea that they work as a group in order to try and accomplish specific goals. And if you're a part of that group, then they help you to acquire a stronghold, because the more strongholds that they have in affiliation with their circle, the more powerful that they are overall.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other scenarios of when the PC might get the stronghold, but I feel like those are primarily like the setup is that you're associated with some type of circle, you're able to have it applied to you, you're going to come across some tower and defeat the wizard that's there and then take it for your own. And maybe it's just my very limited imagination, but I always perceive a stronghold for a wizard being a tower of some sort. So you either have to build one, come across one, or have one granted to you.
Yeah, which is true of most strongholds. Like, those are the common avenues that you get to acquire a stronghold. It's either a gift, it's a conquering, or it's something that you create yourself. So And any of those options are fine. I think that creating your own stronghold is fine if the player really wants to have that much specific control over the processing of the tower. But that's, again, something that we've talked about in our first video, where it's like, how much time and attention do you want to pay into that? Whereas if you're talking about either conquering a tower or being gifted a tower, it's something that you can kind of put together and go, okay, this is what you have, which makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific things that you might find in Wizard Strongholds, though, that you may not find in all other Strongholds. I mean, we talked a little bit about Warlocks and other magic users previously, and how they may have things like summoning circles or arcane libraries or things along those lines. Is there anything specific you can think of for wizards that you may build within that particular stronghold that you wouldn't see in another one?
I mean, definitely you would have the wizard towers, you would have the alchemy labs. These are things where it's like, okay, again, how specific do you want to get with it, or how involved do you want to get? Because in my games, I allow my magic users to create magic items. So there's the possibility of enchanting. I allow them to create potions. So there's the possibility of creating or performing alchemy in order to create potions. There's summoning circles, like you said. So there's the possibility of calling in outside entities. And that might be something where it's like, I am calling in these entities in order to get knowledge, get information, provide a service of some kind, protect the tower, whatever it is. And that's one of the benefits in the Stronghold system that I use, is that if you have an upgraded or a powerful version of a summoning circle, then you automatically have summoned armies that will defend the tower if it's ever under attack or under assault, and it's just kind of built into that entire process. One of the other things and that I play with that is more just kind of a creative option that you can do if you've got a wizard tower, is the protections that exist outside of the tower. And this is something that I really enjoyed back in the day from Dragonlance, where they would have basically these areas around the tower that protected the tower that were just associated with it. So the tower in Palanthas had this grove around it that caused terror for anybody who entered it, and if you failed your fear saves, then you weren't able to basically cross the grove, and even if you went in the grove, you would be attacked and assaulted by undead, which made it almost impossible to cross. And then the tower in Wayreth was one that was basically a maze, that if you went into the tower and you weren't granted permission to approach if you entered the forest and weren't granted permission to approach the tower, then you could become perpetually lost in the forest and never find your way back out again. Those are very, very powerful ones. They work very much better in a story sometimes than they do in an actual D&D game. But versions of those, I think, are very exciting for a PC to be able to come up with. What do the protections look like for your tower for unwanted visitors? So you don't just have random NPC peasants walking into your tower all the time without permission.
I think as we kind of shift topics here and looking at coming into an NPC stronghold and having a quest giver within a stronghold that's ran by a wizard, I think that aspect becomes very intriguing because it determines whether or not you've been invited there. If there's certain elements you have to overcome before they perceive you as being worthy enough to be able to take on tasks from them, which may just be overcoming their basic defenses that they have outside of their tower before they're going to give you anything. Do you have to have an invitation in order to get there and come to them? Do you have a series of quests you have to go through in order to acquire that invitation to get into their tower? And so it almost is like an immediate level of different like quests or objectives that you have to overcome before you even sit down with the wizard to have him give you quests.
Right, and that's the thing too, is that if you have a wizard in your party, I think that to some degree that will occur automatically. The wizards are going to pay attention to another wizard who is gaining power, so they go, this guy's rising in power there, and he doesn't have any affiliation, any association. They want to bring that person into the fold, because a renegade wizard that is wandering around that has all this power, they don't want to just be running around with all that power. They want that power to be affiliated with themselves to some degree and choose a faction, if you will. So I think that if you have that wizard option as a PC wizard they would want to pull that into the NPC organization, and that's the way that I would approach it most of the time. Or I would create a reason in-game for the PC to approach the NPC, usually because they're like, oh, I want this spell, and I go, okay, well, if you want that spell, you need to go find somebody who can give it to you. Q, enter the NPC wizard who has that spell scroll for sale. So those are ways that you can kind of bridge that connection when you've got the wizard. Otherwise, I mean, as far as the PCs go, it's going to have to do with that. But I like the idea of you have to jump through hoops. You're just not going to be granted access into this tower because that is not only their home, but it's also the source of all of their knowledge. It's where they keep all of their spell books and all of their study materials and everything that they've worked their entire life for. They don't want just random grimy adventurers walking in and touching their stuff.
Yeah, and again, I'm kind of old school when I think about wizards. I'm thinking about your Merlins, your Gandalfs, your traveling wizards that have all this power. They've been around for centuries at minimum. So they have this desire to have an acquisition of knowledge, to have an acquisition of power of some extent. They're very defined in their purpose and what they want to achieve. And so when you're engaging with them in their stronghold, you're getting quests from them. It's much of what you're saying, but it's just this very meticulous process of being accepted into their fold and having you jump through the right hoops to make sure that you're worthy enough to actually deal with them. And they're not going to just deal with the regular run-of-the-mill individual who they could find on any corner. Right.
And, well, it depends on the power of the wizard. Are we talking about a newly risen level 10 wizard who just got their stronghold, who maybe is like, I'm not powerful enough to go do all this stuff myself. I can hire some adventurers to go do some stuff for me.
Or a well-equipped wizard who isn't going to go out and do these meticulous tasks because it's beneath them.
Right. Or, like we talked about in the sorcerer video, they may be spread too thin. The Gandalf style, where it's like Gandalf can't be in every location at once. He has to have other people doing other tasks because he can't do it. So he sends Aragorn in one direction, he sends somebody else in another direction. He has other people doing things for him because he knows what needs to be done, but he is limited by his ability to do all things at once.
Yeah. So, we ready to go back to antagonists?
I guess so.
Yes!
The point is, though, that as far as the NPC goes, I think that their quest giving, it should have purpose with a larger plan and a larger goal. I don't think that the wizard is just going to be haphazardly like having people do stuff for them. They're usually very high intelligence. They've planned things out. They know what they want, and like you said, they're meticulous about it. So they're like, go do this thing. I need this thing done by such and such time, and you need to return to me in order to be able to take on the next task because we have things to do. So just kind of a thought there in terms of that NPC quest giving, that it should be very directive and specific because of the high level of intellect they're working with.
And I like the idea that it's playing into a larger plan that you may not even recognize what that plan is or what the purpose is. It may seem to be meaningless at first glance for whatever they're providing you, but it does play into a bigger plan and is needed to be done.
Right. For good or evil, honestly. So, all right, antagonist, Joshua. How about it?
All right, antagonist. So, going back to when you're trying to overcome the wizard stronghold, which we threw out. I just love the idea of doing it. It's like coming back to Conan, it's the barbarian, right? Is that the one where he goes into the wizard stronghold? It's just, it's such a phenomenal feat to try to overcome an individual that has so much power, and looking at what that school is from which they're deriving their power to really be unique in the way that you're setting up the defenses. And we've already provided several ideas of defenses at the beginning of this video, as well as looking at how they may be there within the NPC or PC context. But it's finding challenges that are unique for your characters to overrun. Now, luckily, D&D's been around for a while. ttrpgs have been around for a while, and there's a lot of creative individuals that have put out, your top 100 ways to make defenses. But I want to encourage, GMs to look at the adventuring that their party is doing, the particular wizard they're facing, the school they're utilizing, and try to find creative ways to develop a stronghold that always feels unique when you step into it, that feels like it's a new location in a new place, a new obstacle to overcome, and not just something that's run-of-the-mill that you would usually see, this kind of cookie cutter in value.
Yeah, and I think part of that is leaning into the archetype, but part of that is, too, that not every archetype has to look the same, right? So we've talked about the illusionist. One illusionist may be doing illusionary terrains where they're changing the environment around them. Another one may be creating illusionary creatures. And another one just may be using basically phantasmal type stuff where it's like lights and color, and it makes it impossible to concentrate or focus while all of this real stuff is going on around them. You don't have to make every single illusionist stronghold look the same. You can get creative with the way that you put together those options and make things interesting and unique, so that when you have an illusionist stronghold in one campaign and then you have one in the next campaign, they don't look identical.
Yeah, and setting up the stronghold itself so that it has immediate impacts on the physiology, mental state, even emotional state of your characters as they're going through, and having that come to life in the course of the game. If I've spent 3 hours stepping through dimension doors that are just doing fuck all and sending me all over this goddamn tower, and I can't find my way to the end guy because I can't find the right dimension door that I'm supposed to step through, I might have a reduction to my will saves. I might have a reduction, or my wisdom saves. I might have a reduction, be fatigued because I haven't been able to sit down and eat because I can't find my way back to the freaking donkey I left outside that has my rations on its back. Like there should be
right, which is kind of the same idea as that Wayreth Forest, right? It's like you're in a perpetual maze. You haven't even found the tower yet. You're still walking in circles in the forest in Zelda because you can't figure out the combination that gets you to the end. Mm-hmm. Which is definitely something that I've done. I had a campaign that I ran where I had a bunch of players who went into a subterranean prison. In the prison, in order to find the end of the prison where the guy was locked in, it was a maze where they had to figure out which doors that they had to go through in which order in order to locate the person. Because if they did it wrong, they would just started
back at the beginning.
Yeah, go back to the beginning. They were randomly hopping through rooms, and they couldn't figure out which room that they were supposed to be in. And every single room had some kind of trick in order to figure out what was going on, because some of them had wild magic zones, some had dead magic zones, and it was just a nightmare to try and get through. But it was like they had to figure out the trick to be able to get through to get to the end and do what they needed to do.
So as aggravating as all this can sound, it's also important that you, as a GM, I've played this campaign with you, and I remembered, I think it was one of our players he's like, I'm just going to run north continuously.
Yeah.
It still eventually came back to where we began at. But I think it's important that you do set your players up for success by giving them opportunities to find the clues that they need to find, or before they ever get to the wizard tower, having, alertness checks while they're in town to hear rumors or hear ideas of particular items that they might need in order to overcome some of the obstacles once they get there. Just don't lead them in blind and just expect them to spend 3 to 4 hours pulling their hair out so that those deductions on their character attributes become real deductions in their life.
Yeah, I agree. I always try to give as many opportunities as possible. I leave clues everywhere, and a good rule of thumb, because we're kind of off kilter here a little bit in terms of what we're doing, but if you're going to leave one clue, you need to leave 3, because most often your players are going to miss one clue if you only leave one clue. Make sure, and if they do miss a clue or they miss all 3 clues, repeat the clues in the next room. Allow multiple opportunities to catch those things, because there's definitely that disconnect between being a physical person in a physical location looking for clues and being a player sitting behind a table or behind a screen trying to imagine what it is that you're looking for. So give the opportunities to be able to solve those problems, particularly when we're talking about magic, which is not something that we're familiar with natively to be able to interact with in the same way that we would the regular world around us. So
some of us are not native. No, I'm just okay. So when we're looking at this BBEG though, and looking at layer action specifically to kind of bring this video full throttle or full around
Whatever.
Whatever the terminology is. I think it's important, and I think this is what you and I have been touching on through most of this video, is that the tower itself and the surrounding land is almost in of itself has regular layer actions that are occurring all the time because it's all imbued with magic.
Right.
And so making this kind of up the ante once you get into the final room with the wizard to battle them, I think is what we want to focus on here. But I always perceive as like the tower and the surrounding land as having continuous layer actions because it's all imbued.
Yes. So, and yeah, it's basically what I do in a lot of the games that I run is non-combat. I'll do longer rounds. So I'll do 10-minute rounds or something like that. Every 10 minutes we do a check, or every hour we do a check, depending on what the speed of the game is at that point. But what you're talking about in terms of these continuous layer actions, something happens every 10 minutes or something happens every hour. Those are good ways to kind of allow that repetition and that reminder that they're still in this location and something is still happening. And they're perpetually underneath kind of the thumb of whoever the master of the tower is until they leave. So make sure that it's appropriate, takes pace with the game that you're setting up, but otherwise, yeah. But as far as specific layer actions, I think that you can look at the default, which is basically cast a spell as a layer action. That's always an option, which I think we talked about with the sorcerer one, usually level 1 through level 3.
Yep.
Works pretty well. I wouldn't go much beyond that, and even level 3 should only be something that you're looking at maybe like a 20th level wizard. This is still deducting from the total number of spells that they have. However, another option for just a passive benefit that a wizard has while they're in their tower is that they have access to additional spells. They might, because they've got their spell books, they've got all of their materials nearby, they're in the font of their power, they should have a larger coterie of spells than they normally would if you found them traveling along the road.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other things that you might do. Things like Dimension Door, to me, are really popular. I know I kind of mentioned that before, but I like wizards having that. If you're in the final room, they can just step Dimension Door as a layer action and move to another area to be able to cast their spells and get distance between them, and especially those heavy hitters that are in the party. I think that gives them a quick out that is helpful, or teleportation of some kind that can happen on Roll20.
Time, speed, and separation for a wizard. Because, separation in terms of a dimension door, summoning walls of fire, walls of ice, whatever it is, blockading them away from the rest of the group. You don't necessarily have to limit the battle to one floor. They might be able to transfer up a floor, transfer down a floor, moving back and forth, because the wizard, again, high intelligence creature, they're not going to just stand in one spot and try and cast spells against a party of 6 as they're running at them with swords. That's just dumb. So... And then just in terms of like specific spells that are going to be cast or specific layer actions, pay attention. Evocation, they're going to be throwing out damage spells for the most part. Illusion, you're going to have mirror image, but allow those mirror images to be larger. I'm trying to think of it's the classic thing where it's like you have the wizard and then he duplicates and duplicates and duplicates, and before you know it, you're in a ring of wizards or a ring of your enemy, and you don't know which one is the correct one, because that's what the illusionist is going to do. The abjurer is going to suddenly have the suit of armor that's sitting against the wall fly over and cover him and protect him so that he can continue to cast spells unhindered. Like that type of thing. Just get really creative with what do layer actions look like and how can you use them. The charm or the enchantment wizard is going to suddenly have a mass dominate going throughout the entire room to try and take control of everybody. Really have fun with it and figure out what you can do to lean into the archetypes, I think, because it's just a good approach for it.
I agree. That's about what I have with wizards overall. I think that gives a lot of good starting points, at least, in approaching strongholds with them. Yeah.
We really appreciate everybody hanging around for our Strongholds series. This is one of the longer series that I think that we've done. We're looking forward to starting the next one. If you've enjoyed this series or you've enjoyed our videos in general, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're aware of when the next video comes out. But regardless, we put out videos every single Monday, and we'll continue to do so.
Judge and Brew.